Thank you, Crispy. Hey everyone, my name is Russ Weekly, Head of Intopia Training. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Camaragal people. And I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to extend that to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar today. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Russ. Welcome to those who are joining. I know that we've kicked off right on time, so we should be seeing a few more people coming in soon. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the directors of Intopia. I would also like to acknowledge that I am presenting this webinar from the lands of the Gadigal Nation and pay my respects to elders past, present, and also emerging.
Cool. We'd also like to acknowledge the captioning is being done by AI Media. And for those massive crowds that have joined us today, if you've got any questions, there's a QA function in the Zoom chat there. So just fire in questions at any time you want. You can also put them in chat, but if you use the QA feature, we can track them better if at all possible. And a recording of this webinar will be published a little bit later on our YouTube channel, and we'll notify people through social media when that's done. Back to you, Sarah, for a bit of discussion on what today's about.
So today, Russ and I were going to talk about how to measure and improve your accessibility knowledge within your team. We do a lot of work with organisations who want to build up their knowledge and skill. And often, that's done through training and other sorts of activities. So we thought we'd pull our knowledge together to share what a good accessibility training program could look like, but also for teams of any size. So we do work with a lot of large organisations where, it's nothing for them to say, oh, we have 200 developers we want to train. But we also work with organisations who might be quite small. So they might only have 2 or 3 developers and obviously, other people within the digital team. So we're trying to sort of, take a bit of a look at all of those different aspects that go into what a training program looks like. And for us, we've done training since pretty much we started at Intopia. So that's now over 7 years ago. I think we were doing training almost from day one. And for us, it's always been role-based. So we sort of very much embrace that, everyone does have a role to play in accessibility, and it is about understanding your role and then having that knowledge and skill in order to be able to include accessibility as part of your sort of day-to-day activities. We started out having instructor-led training in groups, so that was about 20. Pre-COVID, of course, most of it was in person, and then COVID came along and we moved online. But it was always sort of, that sort of smaller group training, because it gives a better experience for people. We don't want large groups because it tends to then just end up as a, one-way communication. And that probably leads us into the fact that our training has been constantly evolving over this time. So as we started doing more training courses and getting more feedback, then we took that on board and actually improved and iterated on the training. And I know one of the key things that we always heard was, people loved the activities. And so we started out and we always wanted to have training that was, interactive. So we started out with what I'd call maybe a bit of interactivity, and then everyone went, more interactivity. And so we continued, sort of including more and more of those activities. But I think it was really around a year and a half ago that we started to significantly change the way we did training. And a lot of that had to do with our colleague Tess joining the team, who was an expert in learning science. So they brought along a whole lot of sort of knowledge and information about how people learn. So whereas before we knew people loved interactivity, but we kind of were thinking about we need to kind of deliver a concept in a little bit of a, lecture style way and then have an activity. All of a sudden we got a much richer understanding for active learning and activity-based learning, and how we could really evolve our training to be very, very interactive so that people could learn by doing, learning by failure. One of the things I learned was, I say a buzzword because it always feels like that, but, you know, productive failure, something that I never knew about. And it really allowed us to kind of evolve, you know, how we did our training. As well as that, as accessibility is maturing in organizations that we're working with, we had some clients who were also willing to look at overall training programs. So, you know, a lot of clients do come to us, and because we've got all our role-based training, you know, that kind of thing, they might say, oh, I'll have 2 developer, you know, sessions, and I'll have 1 designer session and the like. And that's, you know, that's what they do. But these organizations were really interested about creating a tailored program for them. And they tended to be those larger organizations too. So, you know, we also needed to look at how do we deliver training in a scalable way, but also not stopping at training. Training is only one part of building knowledge and skill and supporting people in organizations in order to do that. So we got this opportunity to really sort of push the boundaries and be doing complete training programs with, you know, sort of understanding, you know, people's skill before we start, and then delivering training and even delivering it in different ways than perhaps what we'd done before, or that kind of thing. So this is, you know, we've sort of had those opportunities to do that, which has really grown our, I think, knowledge in how to build knowledge and skill within organizations. In addition to that, what we're finding is that as organizations mature as well, they are looking at their overall accessibility program. So we're doing some maturity assessments, looking at all the different dimensions that go into what makes a mature organization, and looking at what they, you know, where they currently are, where they want to be, and how they get there. And of course, knowledge and skill is one of those core dimensions that go into any sort of organizational maturity. And it does have links in other areas like, you know, process. You've sort of got to have, you know, it needs to work hand in hand with, you know, process and ways of working. It needs to work hand in hand often with culture. So sort of that proverbial, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Well, culture sometimes is, you know, that part of the training might lead that horse or that person to, you know more about accessibility, but culture might actually make them want to drink. So it's all these elements and aspects that kind of play into the program that we've, you know, been able to understand more by working with a variety of organizations. And Russ, over to you.
Yeah, cool. So thanks for that background. So today we're going to be talking about some scenarios, and we're going to be looking at 2 fictitious companies, and they're like, let's call them Company A and Company B. And Company A and Company B both want the same sort of things. They want uplift of accessibility skills within their teams so that they can produce more accessible products. So both of them want to get the job done, but you'll see that they have different approaches. And what we're going to show you is almost like a spectrum here of, you know, people coming in with very limited understanding of what they need to very mature sort of outlook about training and broader maturity across a team. But before we get into those scenarios, it's really important that we're going to present in Company A as sort of very rudimentary sort of maturity model. There's no judgment on Company A because everyone has to start somewhere, and some companies have no time or staff or, you know, money or whatever it might be in order to sort of move up that maturity model. So this is really just to show you a spectrum of where companies could be. And hopefully there might be something that you could take from this, even if it's just one thing that you could put into your processes. So again, no judgment on either of those teams. So what we're going to do is look at Company A and Company B in 4 big sort of areas of work. And the first one is, before you actually start training, identifying the current knowledge and skills within the team. And that's to try and work out if there are any gaps in knowledge. Then we're going to jump into creating and developing the actual training program. And then the next one is the post-training. And finally, it's the ongoing evaluation and review, which is a lot of people forget as well. So we're going to look at each of them, looking at company A and company B. So let's get started. So what we're going to look at first is step one is identifying current knowledge and skills and gaps. So company A has found out that their site has some accessibility issues. And for some reason, they've decided, okay, we need to train engineers. They're the group that we need to identify. And why is that? Well, because they've suddenly realized there are issues, and developers are often the first people that are targeted. So they feel that their designers already crossed the issues, they don't need to worry about them, but developers are the ones who are going to make the big difference. So they're not worried about anyone else. They just want to focus on developers in this first round. But that's company A. Let's hear about company B from Sarah.
So we have company B, and I did want to point out, Russ said there's no judgment on company A. I'm also going to say company B is not perfect either. They just maybe, a little bit more mature in the way that they're thinking about things. So company B understands that they do need to identify their current knowledge and skill in order to inform, what gaps they are. But they actually want to have some both quantitative and some qualitative data in order to use to sort of, before they proceed to step two, which is actually look at the actual training program and what might go on to it. So they actually think and look at doing 3 different types of activities to give them some sort of quantitative, some data that they can use. The first is they do conduct an audit of their site to determine what its current state is. Now, they know that might not necessarily map directly to knowledge and skill within the organisation, but it at least gives them a bit of an idea of, where they're at, maybe any common themes that are coming through. The second thing they do is they actually create a knowledge check questionnaire. So they send this to key staff across the organisation that have roles that sort of relate to or have accessibility as part of them, in order to check, which areas, they might need to be addressed. So that's the second sort of form of quantitative data they want to collect. The third one is a self-assessment survey. So the second sort of knowledge check is kind of what it says. It's checking the knowledge or the current level of skill people have and understanding in accessibility. Whereas the third sort of measurement is understanding their sort of employees' confidence levels around accessibility and the role that they play in accessibility. So they're using those two sort of concurrently. So that's the quantitative side of things. They also, though, want a bit of qualitative data. So what they are doing is conducting some interviews or focus groups with some of those key roles that are part of building or buying an inclusive product. So they're wanting to delve into a little bit more detail about, what people do know, but also not just what they know, but how are they thinking and feeling about accessibility as well. So based on this, they actually then can use this data to sort of see where they might, have gaps. So they do recognize that, core to this is their designers and their engineers. So they're actually going to start by looking at upskilling their designers and engineers. But they also have identified that they would need to sort of tease out what the different roles and responsibilities are for different people in their team. And that's company
Cool.
B.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's have a talk about this before we go on. So Sarah and I will both have a little bit of commentary on this. So a couple of points from me and then back to Sarah. One of the things we've noticed is the stuff with company A is quite a common thing. A lot of people don't either have time or the foresight to actually decide to do any of those processes to evaluate their staff. So a lot of times it's done on a hunch. Now, sometimes that hunch turns out to be valid, but other times with no data at all, it turns out that that team being trained in isolation is either it's never detrimental, but not holistic enough to sort of suit the needs. So just be aware that doing things on a hunch is sometimes valuable, but it's always better to collect data if you can. And the second thing is just a little bit of a story around. We saw two sort of once being discussed: the questionnaire and self-evaluation. The questionnaire is an interesting one because it gives you specific data about the knowledge of each staff member. Self-evaluation is just about confidence, like how confident you feel you are. And both is good to test before and afterwards, because hopefully what you get is a score in both cases that lifts after training. But one of the things we found is that a questionnaire, while being the best form, is also very hard to motivate staff to go and do like a 30-minute test. Some people really enjoy it. It's sort of like a going back to high school, but for others it can be either daunting or just they don't have time to do it. And so in some cases, the self-evaluation, which is literally a 5-minute task, can be quicker to get over the line. So just be aware that there's a bigger commitment to going in for questionnaires. They have to be well written. The people need to write them, need to understand accessibility. So it's not something you just quickly pluck out of air. They need to be well crafted in order to get better data. Sarah, I think you've got some points as well.
Yeah, I actually wanted to pick up on that balance between quantitative and qualitative, and also, I guess, the, how you interpret, particularly self-assessment, I think. So I have had an experience with an organization where we did do a variation of both. So it was sort of a self-assessment survey, although it was more at a high level. It wasn't necessarily, very, very specific to people's roles. And then also we did, some focus groups and interviews. What I found interesting was in the sort of self-assessment, the people that, and I think there was about 60 or 70 odd people, so it wasn't necessarily a small sample size, but the people who filled out the survey did say that they actually felt like they had a fair confidence in their understanding and their knowledge and skill related to their role. So it was like, gee, that's great. And then there were other questions like, what was the biggest barriers to delivering inclusive products? And the second biggest barrier was training or lack thereof. And other questions like free text, when we were asking, like what's some of the things that we could do to help you with your role? Again, training, knowledge was like a really, really core theme. So that sort of was a little bit, odd for us. And I think, what we found then in talking to groups is that when we were able to tease that out a bit, they kind of had a bit more confidence in their knowledge, but it was within their kind of frame of reference. So they were quite confident about the accessibility basics. But when you started to dig in a little bit, it was the more advanced concepts that they weren't really familiar with. So it was really great to get those two views in order to inform then, what the training program would look like. Now, some people could say maybe if we did do more detailed assessments, so, maybe digging a little bit more into specific areas, we might have got a bit richer data and we wouldn't have had that sort of conflict between what people rated versus, some of those other things. But it's still, that combination really gave us a fantastic base then to go, okay, what are our next steps?
Cool. The other thing Sarah and I were talking about before this is like, if you're going to send a questionnaire or a survey out, it has to be done well, and it has to be done by people that can actually encourage staff to do it. So if you've got an accessibility team and they try and ask all these other people in the organization to fill in a form for them, they might not get buy-in. So making sure that managers of teams understand the benefit for this for everyone. And as Sarah was saying before the session, we were chatting about it, like you also have to convince the people of the value of this. Like, why am I going to spend 30 minutes filling in a form for you? We have to turn that around and talk about the value could be in, the outcomes for them. And also leads back to Sarah's other point, which is the qualitative is those interviews and focus groups where you're talking to teams. And that a lot of people get a bigger buy-in because people always like to talk about things going wrong in their teams. And if you can get people together and ask them questions about how they're operating, but put an accessibility lens on that, you can sometimes get really valuable information. Sarah, have you got anything else to add to that one?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Cool. Okay, let's go on to step 2. So this is creating and developing the training program. So we're back to poor company A. So they search for and find an external provider, conduct their audits, their accessibility training, and they find the company based on word of mouth, which is fine. And they identify that they want the training to be highly interactive because they've heard that's a really good thing. They want lots of activities in it. and they want to focus on stuff that's directly related to them. So their current practices and where improvements can be made in their workplace. So there's a lot of good in there, as well as maybe some things that could be improved. But let's go and have a look at Company B. Sarah.
So Company B also looks at doing training, but what they decide to do is actually look at a entire program. So they look at it as a series of phases because they're like, look, we can't do everything all at once. So their initial phase is kind of looking at some basic accessibility training for those designers and developers. They decide to focus on those first because they're like, look, if we can get that embedded into the design and development process, you know, things like maybe doing QA testing might be able to come later because they've got a fair level of confidence that, you know, if we get it sort of, let's say 80% right, designers and developers are doing their thing, then, you know, that's sort of a good investment in time. But they also recognize that it's not just the, let's say, the doers, the people who are on the tools, creating the products, designing the products. They realize that things like, you know, your product managers or your product owners or your iteration managers, they actually have an important role to play in supporting that sort of overall accessibility goal within the product or the area that they are responsible for. So they're actually going to spin up some awareness training in the first instance to kind of build awareness and also, you know, outline a bit of that, you know, what is it that we're aiming for and what is it that we need to do for those sort of, yeah, management type levels. They also, though, recognise that there's that interplay between the different roles. So who has the different roles and responsibilities? So they're going to sort of align that sort of work with some of the initial training. And then as they go on, they're going to spin up, you know, sort of extra or additional training, you know, moving on to more advanced concepts for designers and developers, moving on to a bit more of a formalized process for our managers, you know, bringing in those testers. They're kind of looking at it as a really, you know, sort of phased program. Company B, like Company A, though, recognises that they want good quality training. So they're looking for that interactivity. They're looking for that active learning in the providers that they're looking at. Oh, and Russ, you're on mute.
That teach me to cough on camera. Sorry, bro. Yeah, so just a little bit of discussion around, you know, these two companies and some highlights to raise. Sarah raised this thing about other roles. And one of the biggest things that Sarah and I have seen over the years is actually two parts to this. It's the other roles and the connectivity of roles. So while a lot of people will focus on designers, developers, testers, it's all, as Sarah said, it's all those other people, the PMs, iteration managers, BAs, etc. It's so important that they're involved as well, because otherwise you get this frustrating experience where people on the tools understand the value, but everyone around them that's allocating work and time aren't on board. But the other one we'll talk about more in detail soon is the connectivity between roles. And this is actually the most sticky point that really affects a lot of people. So it's great to train designers and developers and testers, but what about where things fall? A quick example would be who defines heading levels? Is that done by designers or developers or where in between? And simple discussions like that, especially when it comes to accessibility, those things fall between the gaps. And it's really important not only to give them training, but work out where roles and responsibilities lie. Sarah, what about you?
I just wanted to add, you know, that importance of the likes of your PMs and that, you know, we've seen that play out in organizations where it's not anything to do with their training program, but you talk to sort of, you know, different groups and different Scrum teams, and you find that the PMs that are, let's call it pro accessibility, their teams actually are doing much more in that accessibility space by just, you know, having a PM that highlights it, that understands it, that asks about it, that, you know, maybe does manage their stakeholders in terms of, you know, how much time is needed in order to complete a feature or that kind of thing. So even outside of training, yeah, those roles can be really crucial, and that can just happen, you know, without anything, which is why we've kind of identified them as something that is crucial, you know, when you're thinking about your training program.
Yeah, cool. The other thing we were talking about is over time versus all at once. So there's this, solid argument for both. We work with companies that just want to get everyone trained on the spot. And the good thing is that you get immediate uplift. But in some cases, you want to have actually take a break. So, rolling out some training and evaluating it and then rolling out other training. So whenever you're thinking about rolling out training within your organization, it's really important to think about how strategically you're going to roll it out and whether it's better to do some roles, evaluate, and then other roles, etc. No right or wrong here, but just there are two schools of thought, and both have strengths and weaknesses.
I think the other consideration to that is also, even within a individual training course, let's call it, how quickly do you have to move through it? So as I said, back pre-COVID, everyone expected us to come on site to do training. And, because you take the travel time to get there and that kind of thing. So for us, it used to be, we come in, you do a full day's worth of training or 2 days worth of training, you get it done and you leave. And we've all probably been there where, at a certain point in a day's worth of training, the eyes glaze over, the brain's off, off wandering.
Normally just after lunch, just after you've had lunch, you're nodding off.
Yeah. And by the afternoon tea, everyone's just, had enough. So the other thing to think about is also how that training is delivered. Can you kind of space it out a bit so people get a concept or, a theme or something like that, but then have that time to bed that down, and maybe, there's sort of a rolling schedule of concepts that are being taught. And this could be within a single role, so that people have that time to learn, to then practice in their day-to-day activities. That may lead into stage 3, which is a bit of a review of how things are going, not to give anything away. But yeah, that's the other part of it. It's not just the entire program, it's even how do you deliver that training. If I had my choice, I would, break up training into very, very sort of small, modules, maybe half an hour maximum, maybe hour a week, and actually have a bit of a program of, okay, you're going to learn about keyboard interaction today. Now you're going to go and you're going to implement it within your project. Then let's have a look at, how that sort of plays out. I think that would be my ideal, but I don't always get to do my ideal.
Speaking of ideal, one of the things that we really believe in, and Sarah mentioned this at the beginning, is this idea of engagingness and stickiness. And if you're looking for training, if you could do it in a short burst of time, that's a great thing. But within that, you really want to have lots of activity and people are learning with doing rather than just talking about it. And we have our own little rule in Intopia with training, which is like, you shouldn't be talking at slides at all, but no longer than 5 minutes before people go away and do anything. And I don't know whether you've ever noticed this. If I glaze over if I'm just being talked to for a while, and I glaze over if someone's telling me about something, but I can't practice it. So you really want training where people are doing and not just being talked at. So that's another thing as well. Stickiness is something we're really into.
And, doing might be a quick quiz. It doesn't have to be a major activity. It's just something that gets some interactivity and kind of breaks up the talking head, as, is often called, which, funnily enough, that's what this webinar is. But I think
cool. The other thing is, you go.
No, go on, Ross.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think what I've seen also the value of that sort of engagement, and we've had one example comes to mind of a client who had training actually with one of the big US accessibility consultancies, and was like, gee, people, it was a sort of talking head style training, pretty boring and monotonous from what I was told. And someone came into the organization that's actually had attended our training, and so they said, oh, actually, go talk to Intopia. They tend to be a bit more fun and interactive, And that client was really, really happy with, the way we did things and that interactivity. But I think what was core to it is that first lot of training, they're like, we didn't get any value out of it. It was like, it went in one ear, out the other. people didn't pick it up, they didn't remember it, they weren't, then taking it and popping it, into their everyday practice. So, you don't want to waste your money in essence, So, and whether, and money is not just necessarily an external vendor. Even if you're doing this internally, money is time. If you're spending lots of time developing a program, once again, you want it to be of value.
Yeah, cool. Right, let's go on to step 3. So the training's all done, and now we need to say what companies might do once the training's finished. So what happens in post-training? Well, for company A, it might sound terrible, but I'm sure a lot of you experience this. The engineers have finished their training. They're a bit excited. They want to go and put it in practice, and they're thrown back into their current world where POs, BAs, etc. They don't really care. They're just focused on getting the job done. So they've got new knowledge, but it quickly becomes apparent that a lot of the accessibility actually begins earlier on in the design phase. And it turns out the designers haven't been trained. So developers are starting to feel really frustrated because they can't put what they want to put into practice because they've got POs and BAs telling them to get work done. And as well as that, they've got designers who are coming to them with things that they've just realized aren't accessible. So they're sort of feeling the pinch at both ends. And so there's this real sense of frustration. And I've actually heard this in a workshop of my own where developers have said, look, this is great, but what happens when we go back to our teams and they haven't been trained or they're not aware of the needs? And so this sort of isolated approach can be actually, while it's not detrimental, it can be definitely frustrating for a team that's just trained on their own and thrown back in to the churn cycle of productivity. What about company B? Hopefully there's a happier story there.
Well, look, company B, we've seen that company B is taking a bit more of a considered approach. So when they do and when we say complete the training, obviously this program's going to be going on for a long time. So this is more, if they complete a sort of part of the training or that. First of all, what they're doing is they're setting up playbacks with the attendees after the training. So they want to understand, how did the training go? What did people learn? And any changes that might need to be put in place that they haven't considered as part of this program. They also are going to conduct another knowledge check. So we want some data once again to see if people have improved. So we're actually they're going to redo those knowledge checks and also those self-assessment surveys. So it's like, have you actually learned stuff? Do you get the right answers? And are they feeling more confident about what they're doing? So there's those two sort of pronged qualitative approaches once again. And then a little bit later on, they're also going to reconduct some of those interviews and focus groups as well to sort of see how that knowledge is being embedded into the organization. Have there been any maybe barriers that have popped up as they start to use this in action? So they're going to also do this. Now, what actually comes out of this process for company B is that they realize from listening to people that accessibility needs to be integrated into their ways of working. So it's not something separate, but without that clarity of how do they include it within their ways of working, people are struggling a little bit. They also realize that they've done the training, but there was kind of a bit that maybe was missed, which is a bit of a change management process. So this is kind of a little bit new to the overall organization. There are accessibility champions dotted through the people who are, taking the training and that kind of thing. But for a lot of others, this is a little bit new or a little bit different, and they're not quite bought in, they haven't quite bought into it in the same way. So they realize they need to do a little bit more change management around integration of accessibility. And over to you, Russ.
Oh, cool. Am I right? I heard rumors that they also were bringing in some accessibility champions to their crew as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned that often there are accessibility champions, throughout programs. And I think this is where, if we digress slightly from company B and maybe to real life examples, you very often, at least as a trainer, I can say I very often identify who are those ones that are really switched on and excited about accessibility. They kind of stick out as soon as you start your training, and you can really sort of pick up on that. Noting there's going to be quiet ones as well, but often that is the start of forming up an accessibility champions program. So this is something that certainly we see in less so in Australian companies yet, but certainly within some of the bigger companies in the US and the UK. There's a number of different accessibility champions programs, you know, Microsoft, Barclays, BBC, Intuit, four off the top of my head. There's more out there. There's also some great videos of people talking about them and panels of people that, you know, have formed them. But yeah, identifying those champions and then using those champions to help with change management, to help with sharing, you know, the enthusiasm, you know, to work, you know, or maybe even lead the programs of work around updating current, you know, ways of working or that kind of thing, can be really, really powerful. And you're sort of utilizing or at least latching on to those ones that already have a passion for it. And that goes a long way.
Yeah, cool. This concept of change management is the most exciting one from our perspective, because even if you go and train designers and developers and testers, and even if you bring on board POs and IMs and all that sort of stuff, you also still go back to your organization with all this extra new knowledge. And what people start to do often is they'll go and say, well, we'll write some processes. And, you know, they change the ways of working. But it's so easy to document something, and it's very different in order to get it entrenched in the way people work. And a lot of people don't realize that change management is actually storytelling. It's actually getting people to understand that they're in this place and we need to get them over here, and try to get them to be taken on a journey that if you move gradually to these ways of working, then the benefits will, you know, be X, Y, and Z. So it's really about storytelling and convincing of their value. I think we're ready to move on to our final step.
Yep.
Okay, so this one is the ongoing evaluation and review over time. So as we can imagine, company A does pretty well nothing. Just maybe every 12 months they'll pop back in and decide if their team need training. But they're sort of pretty well done and dusted. They think they've done enough. So hopefully company B will do a better job here. Sarah.
Yeah, so company B actually, you know, reviews what they've done and starts to ask some questions. So the initial focus was existing staff. You know, we need to build their knowledge and skill, but they start to look at other areas like, well, what about new staff? So, you know, new staff coming in, there's staff turnover as people leave. How can we integrate accessibility as part of onboarding? So that could be part of existing onboarding programs, but then might also include some accessibility specific training as well that people need to take. So they start to look at those types of things. They also keep that eye on new roles that they might want to train. So they had their sort of plan. They would be rolling out that plan, but, you know, did they miss anything? So often, you know, it might, perhaps if you do a lot of your development in-house or design and development in-house, you know, starts there. But then what about when you're buying products? Have you looked at procurement and how you're going to assess accessibility of the products that you're buying? So they start to look a little bit out there, and that actually involves training as well, because the people involved within procurement need to know what it is they're looking for. Are you going to, you know, do an independent assessment or not? So there's all sorts of things that come into play there that sort of form part of ongoing training. They're quite aware WCAG 2.2 is coming and coming and coming. Anyone on the call who's in the know knows why I say this, because I think we were supposed to have it not last Christmas, the Christmas before. But obviously as standards update and what have you, they want to keep their staff up to date with those, and particularly as their organisation is looking to adopt those. So they need kind of a plan in place, and that includes building that knowledge and skill. But they also realized that there are sort of other areas where they might need to start to look at including some of this information. So hiring people, position descriptions, it would be great if they could attract people that actually have a higher level of knowledge and skill in accessibility to start with. It makes their job a lot easier and they're actually getting, knowledge and skill that they really need. They also realize, it needs to be part of an individual's personal development plan. So that, it's sort of clear that that is part of their responsibility. This is not just a side hustle or something that they can choose to do or not to do. This is something the organization is taking seriously and individuals should as well.
Cool. Just something to add to that. For some teams, it might be just that you need to do little top-ups or refresher courses. So you might not have to do this massive training every 6 months or 12 months, but just being aware, like as Sarah's saying, if it's rollout of WCAG 2.2, it might just be some little refreshers for designers or developers, or it might be just keeping it in front of mind. One of the worst things about it is if you just leave it, it becomes super valuable when people get training, but then it just sort of gradually fades into the background. So even doing little refresher courses throughout the year just keeps it as a topic that could be valuable to staff. So making sure that they're all available there. Sarah, anything else before we go on to wrap up?
Worth mentioning, although some of these items fall in with, we've got our stages, it would be ideal if maybe accessibility was included in an individual's personal development plan before we start the program. So it's not necessarily that these things have to happen at the end of, sort of this flow. Probably more just what we see in reality. So as I said, company B is not squeaky clean and shiny. It's probably more approximating the reality of a company that is more mature, but still is kind of finding their way. And that's why some of these things are, sort of included at the tail end of our, fictitious scenarios and fictitious companies, just because it kind of reflects reality. So don't, in talking through, I guess, these different things, it doesn't mean you have to do them at the points we've identified. It's more just, learning from, I guess, organizations and pointing out things like this so that you can think about it maybe earlier on as well.
Yeah, such a good point. One of the things we've sometimes done is we've done these sessions where we ask people about, do you hire with accessible as one of the features? And the answer is often no. And so while we've talked about that in step 4, that'd be a perfect one to add before step 1, that you start to bring people in so they're already engaged. So yeah. The last really point I'd raise is sort of summary out what Sarah said. This, company A and company B, they're just obviously fictional. And company B looks horrifying to some, like, you don't have time to do all this sort of stuff. But even just picking something, like a bit of data before deciding to do testing might be one, or deciding that just doing people with hands-on tools, we might just also do some awareness for POs and IM. Just finding one extra thing to do on top of training, basic training. Any of those little extras can add a lot of value. And so you don't have to do everything, but just try and pick a few things. And if you really had to pick them, to me, it would be, like trying to be a bit more educated before jumping into training and trying to be a bit more holistic rather than just people on tools. And that gets back to what we said before around those people that make decisions, but also that connectivity between different roles and all the roles and responsibilities, where things fall in the gaps. Those two things can really make a difference to a really cohesive training. Sarah, bring it home. What pearls of wisdom have you got for us all?
Now that you've said that, my mind's just gone blank, and I'm like, how do I
put pressure on you.
I was fine until you did that.
Sorry. So now Sarah's going to say something that will just change your worldview entirely. Over to you, Sarah.
Yes. No, I think all that I will add is that having a plan in place, I think, is really important to kind of an overall training program. So if I was to pick kind of the things that will really, really help with this, one is understanding what the current knowledge and skill is, because you don't want to blow your money on something that wasn't suitable. Also looking at if you are going to, whether, as I said, whether it's an external vendor or whether you're doing it in-house, making sure that it's quality training. So otherwise, once again, you're kind of wasting your time or money, on things if you're kind of not, if it doesn't stick. So that's, I think the second thing. The third thing I think then is that looking, when I say outside the box, maybe things like position descriptions or personal development plans or that kind of thing might not immediately sort of come to mind when you're thinking about training, because often we're kind of thinking about training and we're picking that training off the shelf rather than actually looking at an overall capability program, of work where you're sort of building up that capability over time and you do have that plan in place that you're following. So, thinking through that kind of thing as well, I think is quite important. I'm also always a personal fan of getting people excited. And I've seen this work in so many organizations. I sort of always joke that when I talk about accessibility, often the P word comes up, passion. And I know Russ is no different. We are pretty passionate about what we do. And in doing so, you're creating that groundswell for people. So it's sometimes not just about the training program, it's about having those individuals in the organization, whether it is your accessibility team, whether it is some of those champions that you've identified. It's creating that groundswell so that accessibility is talked about at every part of the process. It's not an afterthought. People don't feel uncomfortable about calling it out. If you're doing design crits or design reviews, for instance, think about accessibility as part of that because it is part of design. See how you can include it within there and actually allow people to do it. I remember, so one of the programs or organisations we did work with was Service New South Wales, and Greg and I did a presentation at AliCamp about the work that we did there. And he said the term, we gave people permission. And there was a few different variations of that within there, but it was permission to learn, permission to say that maybe they don't necessarily know everything, permission to. And so for him, looking at the program, and there was lots of knowledge and skill and that kind of thing that we imparted as part of that program, but it was also about that groundswell and that, people feeling like they could own it, and feeling like it's okay to get it wrong as well, or to not always have the answers. Because unfortunately, accessibility has a little bit of a, if I don't get it right, there's a bit of a fear factor around it. There's a lovely line I got from someone who said they were still approaching accessibility from a place of fear. And often with Australia's less litigious than the US, and this happened to be a US company. And although they actually thought that they were very open to accessibility, they realized in talking to us, they actually were approaching it from a place of fear still. So, all those elements sort of come into intrinsically to the training and all of the support mechanisms that you put around that training program as well. There we go. Was that inspirational enough for you?
Fantastic. Well, I think it's so amazing that no one's got any questions, because it was just such an awe-inspiring wrap-up. But maybe, even if you haven't got questions, maybe some abuse would be good. I don't know how many people are on the call. There's 15 people here. Anyone got any questions for us on life, the universe, Sarah's puppy?
Who's been remarkably quiet.
Yeah, I know. I haven't seen a dog launch from either of us, actually. Mine crashed on camera just before we started to try and steal an apple off my desk. But yeah, if not questions, then that's fine.
All right, I think we'll call it a wrap. Thank you
it's been
so
an honor,
much for joining
Sarah.
us. Yes, it has.
No, let's talk about you first. It's been an honor to get insights from you, especially the wrap up, because it was life-changing. But it's been an honor to have all 16 people on the call as well. And we'll be sending personal thank you letters to each of you through the mail.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye.